friends, we are ready with our third episode on cheese. In our 2 episodes before, we have already seen how cheese could be produced, what are the different ingredients that make up cheese, and we also have tried to classify cheese based on their moisture content and have seen in detail the production of cheese, especially the cheddar cheese. Now, in this episode, we are going to cover the other varieties of cheeses, different other varieties which are enjoyed so much the world over. Before moving into the varieties, we will briefly see how exactly or what are the common things which requires for cheese production. The first is milk. The milking animal most often is cow. It can also be sheep, goat and others. Then comes the organisms known as the microbial starter cultures, bacteria like Streptococcus cremoris, Lactobacillus bulgaricus, and there are so many others of the genera Lactobacillus, Lactococcus, Streptococcus, which are used as starter culture in the production of cheese. What do? They actually convert the lactose in the milk to lactic acid by the mode of fermentation and drops down the pH of milk. This facilitates the curd formation and then followed by renneting, which is actually an enzyme preparation initially obtained from the fourth stomach of suckling calves. Now we have vegetable and microbial rennet on the market, which actually does not use the calf stomach rennet. Now, why cheese? Why do you think people so much enjoy cheese? Obviously, taste is a factor, but other than that, we have the important property like portability, which means it can be easily carried. If you compare milk and cheese, obviously milk being liquid is difficult to carry in different places where cheese is very, very useful. Likewise, the long life or the longer shelf life, as we can call, that is, it can be preserved for a longer time compared to milk. As well as it is very high in fat, protein, calcium and phosphorus, which means that it is highly nutritious. So why not we consume cheese and then milk? Coming to the different types, we will be discussing individually about some of the cheese types, but let us see classifying them into some of the types. First, mold ripened cheese. That is, molds or fungi are used to ripen them, and that can be like Roquefort cheese, Camembert cheese, Brie cheese. We will be seeing all these in detail. Then we have cheeses with holes. Why or what brings about these holes? Now, I think you are very much familiar with this category of cheese, which very often comes in most cartoon pictures. The Swiss cheese with the typical hole in it. Then we have brine cured cheese, which means that brine solution is used for salting and which takes place for a longer time. So we call it brine cured cheese. Examples include Limburger and Parmesan cheese. And finally, we will end up with a discussion of unripened cheese where aging is not required. They are consumed fresh. We have cottage cheese, paneers and others in the category. Let us see the first type, that is the blue vein cheese. Now, all these blue vein cheese have typically molds for their ripening. The first category that we were mentioning, that is the mold ripened cheese, and all of them can be classified into 2 different categories. One, the blue veined and the others. The first, the blue veined ones, usually uses penicillium or organisms fungi in the penicillium genera for ripening during the later stages of cheese production. All these generally have a blue coloration and they can be named as blue cheeses as well. Now, if we move into exactly how they look, they are soft and creamy, as you can see over here, soft and creamy, and appears bluish in the interior. Okay. Now, countries of origin have been different based on the types, and that is how the varieties have been given. The first among these category, that is the blue-veined ones, is the Roquefort cheese. And interestingly, Penicillium roqueforti is the mold which is used to ripen this cheese, giving rise to this blue coloration in between the cheese that you can see. The origin of this cheese actually is France, and it is made mainly from sheep's milk. Now, we can have a creamy and crumbly structure of this kind of cheeses and enjoyed being paired with several different kinds of wines. It's also called as the cheese for kings and popes. The next of the blue vein cheese is the Gorgonzola variety, where it looks more softer and you can very well see the blue veins that is running all through about in the cheese. Now this cheese is most often enjoyed with pears or such kinds of fruits, and the color is mostly yellowish, faint yellowish, and the origin of this cheese is from Italy. So the earlier one of Roquefort is a different origin and so named differently, consumed differently, while Gorgonzola is different on its own. It is produced from cow milk and not from sheep milk. The third in the variety of blue-veined ones is the Stilton. This is the best known of British cheeses, and you can see again here the blue veins which are coming because of the penicillium fungi which are used during the ripening cheeses. These are mainly soft or semi-soft cheeses, and the fat content is approximately 35%. There is basically rind developed, that is due to aging and ripening, the outer structure becomes hard and sometimes also assumes certain colors. In case of this, the rind is naturally developed and basically it's slightly brownish in color, while the interior assumes a bluish coloration because of the fungi penicillium. After this, we are moving on to the next category, which is obviously mold ripened, but they are not blue in color. So what is the difference that we are going to see here? We have camembert and brie in this section, which are again mold ripened, but they are not called as blue veined because it is not Penicillium roqueforti or other Penicillium species which generally gives a blue coloration. Instead, here in camembert, as we see Penicillium camemberti or at times Penicillium candidum, these are whitish colored fungi, and if you see the cheese, you will see there is a white crust present on the surface of the cheese. Now, mostly, if we move on to the production of camembert, it was actually Marie Harel which first produced this kind of cheese from raw milk. They were not using pasteurized milk in the 1700s. But nowadays, this kind of cheese, the camembert variety, is obtained from pasteurized milk and it's called as camembert le Satilian. So this is slightly different, which uses pasteurized milk, while the traditional ones obviously uses raw milk. The region from where it originates is Normandy in France. The fat content is approximately 45% and it is a hard cheese, although the interior, if you can see here clearly, becomes runny after aging. And this white bloom or the rind that is observed here is because of the Penicillium camemberti fungi which is used during the production and ripening period. The color of this cheese is pale yellow. The next in the variety is brie cheese, which is again a mold ripened cheese and not blue in color. This is again produced from similar fungi which is giving a whitish coloration just like the earlier one with a whiter crust or whiter bloom, and we call it the rind being bloomy. Now, in case of brie cheese, what happens is the immature brie at times has this softening look and the outer crust is whitish, while a mature brie means after the complete age of ripening, it assumes a browner crust or rind. That happens because the fungi completely grows and sporulates and generally have the appearance of a brownish coloration on top and not blue. This is also soft and soft ripened and its origin is France. This is also produced from cow milk. Now, with this, we have completed the different types on mold ripened cheese. Obviously, there are no innumerable numbers of mold ripened cheeses, but these are to name a few. Next, we are moving on to the second type with Swiss cheese, which are cheeses with holes. We have two in this category, the Swiss cheese and the Emmental cheese. Now, why exactly these holes are produced? Are we all aware of these holes that are present in cheese? If not, we have consumed, we have seen so many times in different pictures. Cheese to most of us gives a picture like this. Now, the Swiss cheese is essentially made in a similar fashion, but there is a difference. And what is this difference? During the incubation, we add a second bacterial culture other than the lactic acid bacteria. And this second culture is of Propionibacterium, especially the species Propionibacterium shermanii and Propionibacterium freudenreichii. Now, these two essentially produce propionic acid and acetic acid and CO2 in the late fermentation stage. What do we mean by a late fermentation stage? Now, initially the starter culture bacteria or the lactic acid bacteria will produce lactic acid from milk. That is also the same in case of Swiss cheese. But later, after this, we are actually inoculating this Propionibacterium, and they will utilize the lactic acid produced by the earlier organisms to convert that into propionic acid, acetic acid and CO2. We can see the reaction here, and this generation of carbon dioxide or CO2 gets incorporated in the already forming curd and gives rise to the holes very specific of cheese or emmental cheese or Swiss cheese. This particular cheese variety actually is a hard one without a rind. There is no rind over it. It is rindless. It has a pale yellow color because of the addition of annatto cheese color, and the milk used is cow milk. The origin is US. We are moving on to the second variety, that is emmental, on the types of cheese with holes. This is very similar to the Swiss cheese with the holes being produced due to Propionibacterium, but the difference is this has a rind. As you can see here, the emmental is having a rind on it, which is obviously thin but hard, and most often it carries a logo of the producer. Let us now see what other types of cheese are there for us in store. Limburger. Now this is a very interesting variety of cheese. It is one of the smear ripened cheeses where after the production the surface of the cheese gets smeared with the typical bacteria used for ripening. Now what is interesting about this cheese is that it has a very bad odor, rather bad in the sense it stinks, but yet consumed by several people, and the way how it is consumed is also interesting. Most often it is consumed with onions, and you can see here the survey of several kinds of these Limburger cheeses. They have creamy, crumbly and firm and smooth texture, and once the rind is produced, they are washed several times. This category also is actually important because this is an example of brine cured cheese, meaning during the salting step they are immersed in brines for a long time. This gives the typical rind, which is, you can see, slightly paler, brownish or orangish colored, and the interior has a straw coloration. Now because of this repeated washings, the rind appears smoother and is kind of looks like very much in contact with the actual cheese. In the next category, we will be moving on to some other varieties of cheeses all over the world. In that we have brick, which is again another example of the smear ripened cheese using the bacterium Corynebacterium and Arthobacter species of bacteria for smearing on the surface of cheese. And interestingly, why is the name brick? Because it is actually pressed in the traditional processes using bricks. It has an open and smooth texture, while the rind again is washed several times because of the salting step that we see in case of the brick cheese. Moving on to the Parmesan variety. It's a hard variety of cheese, and you can see the stacks are kept in such a way that the rind appears very much natural, and you can also have papers or plastics or other coverings which will cover the rind and have several kinds of implications on it. Now this actually is originating from the region of Italy, and only very few regions in Italy produce this kind of cheese. The Parma, Reggio Emilia, Modena, Bologna and Mantua are the regions which produce this variety of cheese. It is not produced elsewhere. If you consume this cheese elsewhere, means this have been produced in those regions and have been brought from those regions. The cow milk is often used for production, and it is often called as Parmigiano Reggiano because of the regions. Now here we can see the texture is very dense and grainy, and it has a natural rind. It is consumed again worldwide basis by several people, but the specific region is in the Italian region. We have Gouda. Now this is the second most variety consumed all over the world, which comes right after cheddar. Approximately 60 to 70% world over production and consumption is of Gouda cheeses. These are of various types, and here itself in this picture we can see Gouda with different coloration. I hope you can make out the different coloration of the Gouda wheels which are being kept for ripening. Now sometimes Gouda is consumed without ripening at all, fresh, while sometimes Gouda goes on to several stages of ripening, and we do have one variety which is shortly ripened, and in between there are several stages, few more months ripening, finally to end up with a longer ripened, the oldest ripened stages. We are not going to discuss in detail about all those types, but basically in case of Gouda, the texture is actually crumbly, dense and springy at times. It has a wax rind, that means the molds, these molds actually are dipped in wax and then kept for ripening or aging. Gruyere is another variety where interestingly the crust or the rind is somewhat pinned or containing holes. This coloration is yellow and it originates from Switzerland. The rind that is developed with pinned holes is actually naturally derived. We don't have a waxing or plastic covering or anything that is given for the Gruyere cheese. Other varieties include Pecorino Romano, one of the types of Romano cheeses. Like Parmesan, Romano is also a very hard cheese, while we use the term Pecorino, meaning the milk that is used for this production is actually the sheep milk. We have several other Romano and named after the animal, the milk from which is used for the production. But they all more or less are similar, and they have a crumbly, dense and grainy structure, and the rind, which is very faintly observable, is natural. They have a faint yellow coloration and can be consumed with several types of wines. Then coming to the next varieties, we have the softer ones, rather the soft cheeses, which you can see are sometimes mostly rindless. There is no rind, and because there is no ripening here, it is white in color. So mainly these are springy, stringy and supple and soft, and mozzarella, I think all of us know, are very well used. You can prepare it at home just like you prepare paneer or chana at home, and obviously use some bacteria during production, the specific ones, which will give rise to a typical mozzarella cheese. Feta is another soft variety of cheese very similar to mozzarella, and it is again creamy, crumbly and grainy white in color. The origin is Greece, and interestingly this variety of cheese uses combination of milk, that is 30% of the goat's milk and 70% of sheep milk. Coming to paneer, I think all of us in the Indian subcontinent are very much aware of the term paneer, and this is explained with cheese. Why? Because they almost appear same, taste same, but obviously there is a difference. In the Indian subcontinent and typically in the Bangladesh region, where we prepare so much of paneer, it differs from the actual cheese in the sense no bacteria are used during the production stage. So for the acidification stage, they are using either some kinds of acids or certain acid producing powders like calcium lactate, which will lower down the pH. No organisms are involved in production in the case of paneer, but it's been studied along with cheese because all other factors are similar as we can study with respect to the other cheeses types. Actually, the texture becomes chewy, crumbly and it is firm, while we have a rindless variety here. No paneer has any rind as such on it. The color is actually white. On a similar note, in the US and UK, we have the consumption of cottage cheese. This appears very similar to paneer, and actually what happens is, here the difference is when we use the term cottage cheese, that is done by UK and US, they use the starter culture bacteria for the first inoculation, and that is the difference with paneer and cottage cheese. Otherwise they are more or less similar. These are soft and moist, meaning not much of pressing is done. They are allowed to remain. Some amount of whey also remains along with the cheese in these cases. Can be used for a variety of recipes, dishes that can be very delicious at times. So far we have seen different varieties, and we are about to have two more varieties in our discussion, while the first among them is very interesting. It's called as Caciocavallo, and can you see how it is produced and kept? Most often it is tied in this fashion and it has a springy and stringy appearance. It is originating from Italy and is made from cow milk, and obviously the types of organisms which produces this have a ropey and stringy variety, and as such milk becomes curdled in this fashion and they are kept in this way. So it's very interesting, and that is why we have also kept in our discussion. We will wind up with the last type, that is of the processed cheese here. Now, most often we generally in the morning get up, take a piece of bread or two and put a slice of cheese into it, isn't it? This is the cheese variety that you generally very often put into the 2 slices of bread and consume. Now, these are the processed cheeses, meaning the original types of cheeses that we have come across, so many ones, Swiss, Emmental, Gruyere, Roquefort and others. These generally can be processed, meaning most of these can be further taken up, melted and then made into thin slices or thin cubes, which can be easily used by people in their day-to-day life. These are called as processed cheeses. Processed cheeses also include sometimes some flavors, some other herbs, other ingredients, and that gives a very characteristic look and appearance, easily saleable in the market. So this is where we come across several types of cheeses. Covering the whole topic of cheese is not a joke, and we have completed most of it in 3 episodes, and we have also understood some of the different varieties, why they are enjoyed and in which different regions they are enjoyed. They can be paired with wines, they can be consumed as being grated over pizzas, pastas and such. So I think you can have a very wonderful time with the cheese episodes. You can also enjoy cheeses at your own will at home, while also know about what organisms they are made up of and what exactly are the other varieties people are consuming all over the world. Thank you.